All right, so let's. Sorry.
No chicken soup tonight.
I know, right? No chicken soup. Virtual chicken soup, along with virtual hugs for everybody. That's how we're gonna roll. So welcome to Think Different, Tanya. This is our exploration of the classic Bible of Chabad Hasidic philosophy known as the Tanya. And this is a very special class because, as mentioned, this is the last one. Well, this is not the last class, but we're going to conclude the book of the first part of Tanya. The first part of Tanya has 53 chapters. We are going to explore the last half of chapter number 53. So this is an epic moment for some of you. You've been joining me for about a year, or a little over a year. Some of you have joined me for many years in these classes. It's a bit different for everybody, but what's the same is that we've hopefully studied and grown and enjoyed this experience together. And I'm looking forward to an epic conclusion. And I will tell you, as always, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya does not disappoint, right? Even in these, hey, Adina Malka, good to see you.
Hi.
This is it. This is the grand finale.
This is it?
This is it. Don't worry. I've said before, we're still going to learn more. Don't worry. It's not like we're closing up shop, but this is a very special night. From those Thursday night Tanya sessions around my table with the chicken soup, with the kids on the lap. Oh, wait, it's almost like that, Riva.
A monkey.
And a monkey. Nice. Hey, monkey. Cute monkey. And Shia.
It's mine.
It's your monkey. No one's taking it from you. You're safe. So from those home, hey, Ellie, Sollish, we got the whole cast coming back. You know, the original cast and crew. To our foray on online learning through Zoom. It's been quite the experience. But before we wrap it up, we're going to study the last little bit of Tanya. And as I was just saying a moment ago, the Alter Rebbe definitely does not disappoint. It ends on an incredible note. You know, after all the philosophy is said and done, what Chabad Hasidic teachings remind us is that the most important thing is what we do. That the most important thing in life is action. Philosophy and theory and even spirituality is wonderful, but it's not what, as we call, the tachlis. It's not the tachlis. Tachlis means it's not the ultimate. What is the ultimate? The ultimate is what we do. It's action. It's the actions that we take to make the world a better place. So I want to give you a bit of a context. This is something that I've shared before, maybe even many times. And the context is the angels that are visiting Abraham. Abraham, this is shortly after his circumcision. And David is like, I just heard this. And the angels are visiting Abraham. And shortly after his circumcision, and one is bringing him healing, and one is bringing good news about Sarah's birth, pregnancy and birth, and one is bringing salvation to Lot, and one is going to destroy the cities of Sodom and Amorah. So there's many different angels with different tasks, and they come to Abraham and they come to the tent, and he says, "Come on in," and he welcomes them in, and he starts feeding them, and the whole deal, the whole situation. And at some point in the conversation, they say, "Where's your wife, Sarah?" And he says, "Oh, she's inside the tent." There's a beautiful commentary. There's a beautiful mystical commentary that says, what was the question? What was the answer? The angels in heaven, they saw light emanating, a spiritual light emanating from Abraham's tent. So they said, today we get the opportunity to go visit Abraham. We have some business to take care of, but we can see this giant of a man. And they go to Abraham's tent. And the next thing you know, Abraham is welcoming them in, and he's cooking a meal for them, and he's preparing meat, and he's a chef. That's it. Abraham, the spiritual giant, is a good host. That's it. Can't be. Must be Sarah. Must be we're talking about Sarah. So he said, "Where's Sarah?" He says, "You don't get it. She's in the tent." In other words, the greatness that you're looking for is concealed. You're never going to find what you're looking for. See, your understanding as an angel of what spirituality is removed and divorced from practical action on earth. What is holy? What is spiritual? It's when someone's hungry, you feed them. It's when someone's tired, you give them a place to sleep. So when someone needs a shoulder to cry on, you give them that shoulder. That's what holiness is in our plane of existence. Maybe for the angels, there's a different definition. But right here, right now, what it means to be holy is what we do. And so it's so perfect. After 53 not after, but in the 53rd chapter of Tanya, after all the philosophy is said and done, what's the point? What's the takeaway? That what we do matters. And this is the theme of tonight's class. What we do more than anything else is what brings light into the world. It's not how we think, and it's not how we feel, and it's not, our soul that we have inside of us. The bottom line is, are we being a mensch or we're not being a mensch? We're doing the right thing or not doing the right thing. No games, no excuses. It's tachlis. It's action. Yeah. That is what is the ultimate. And I say that this is so perfect for Tanya because it really comes full circle. For those that were with me from the beginning or close to the beginning, you know that the first chapters of Tanya are talking about a Beinani. What is the Beinani? What is this individual known as the Beinani? Beinani literally means the middle person, the intermediate type of person. Not the tzaddik, the perfectly righteous, not the Rasha, the wicked person. The Beinani right in the middle. What's the Beinani? Right? Does that mean somebody that has half, if you kind of put all their deeds on a scale, half good things, half bad things? No, that's not what a Beinani is. A Beinani is someone who's in the middle. A Beinani is a psychological Rasha, but a behavioral tzaddik. A Beinani is somebody who on the inside has all sorts of negative temptations and tendencies and desires, but on the outside does what's right. When it counts, comes through. Even if part of them didn't want to come through, but when push came to shove, they showed up and they did the right thing. That's what a Beinani is. I think John Wayne once said, and I'm paraphrasing, a hero is not someone who bravely steps up and saves the day. A hero is somebody who's afraid, whose legs, I'm totally paraphrasing here, whose knees are shaking in their boots, and yet who still gets the job done. You see, a tzaddik is wonderful, but a tzaddik is perfection. It's easy for the tzaddik to get it done. A Beinani, the hero of Tanya. Tanya is also called Sefer Shel Beinanim, the book for the Beinani. The Beinani is somebody who is very conflicted, very turbulent inside, and yet does the right thing because you know what? Action is what matters most. Our imperfections inside, so what? It's what we do that really matters, which reminds me of one of the most fabulous stories that always makes me think and smile and really appreciate the wisdom of the Rebbe with this story. The Rebbe was once speaking to a college student, Jewish kid, and someone who was connected with Judaism, but not always so. He was in college. So the Rebbe says to him, here, I want to give you a mission. I want you to take on this resolution that you're going to go, when you go back on campus, you're going to wrap tefillin with your fellow students. So that this young man turns to the Rebbe and says, I have to confess, I don't put on tefillin every day myself. So it would be quite hypocritical for me to be the one to encourage everyone else to put on tefillin. I'm not holding there. I'm not on that level. So the Rebbe smiled and said, what, just because you don't put on tefillin every day doesn't mean that means that they should lose out on the mitzvah? So what? In other words, what the Rebbe is saying is, don't let your struggles get in the way of your mission of what you need to do. And it's so perfectly aligned with the opening and the ending of Tanya, which is, you know what? It doesn't matter how you feel. Get the job done, make a difference, because at the end of the day, the light is brought into the world through action, not through thought, not through intention, not through good feelings. That's good. That enhances what we do. But at the end of the day, what we do is what matters most here in the world of action. So how do we get there? How do we get there today in chapter 53? I want to reset chapter 53 because it's been a few weeks since we started chapter 53. We had one session prior on this chapter. So I want to quickly reset what we were talking about, and then we're going to jump back in. The last few chapters, even before 53, we've been talking about the notion of Shekinah, the divine presence, and how although God is everywhere, there are certain spaces where God is seen to be in an obvious and profound way. So it's one thing that something is there. It's another thing to see that it's there. And so God is everywhere, even in this world, but there was a certain place in the world where you could see God, where God was like, oh, there's God for sure. I don't know about other places, but there's God. So what was that place on earth? That was the Holy Temple, the Beit HaMikdash. And of course, as we mentioned, the Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, we have to acknowledge and note that we all need to pray for Israel and pray for peace and safety and security and only blessings. And the Rebbe said many times that we pray not only for Jewish life and safety, but we pray for the life and the safety of everybody. And the sooner conflict ends, the better it is for everybody. And sometimes conflict, sometimes when it comes to these things, we need to, to make sure that these things end and not be protracted. So please God, may the Torah's promise indeed be realized in an obvious way, where God says in Deuteronomy that God's eyes are on the land of Israel from the beginning there to the end of the year. And may God indeed protect all of our brothers and sisters and Jews everywhere in these challenging times. But I mentioned that because I mentioned that in the context of the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple was a space in which where godliness was obviously present. The Mishnah says in Pirkei Avot, we just read it actually this past Shabbat, it says there were 10 miracles that happened every day in the temple. There were 10. You walked into the temple, it was a place of miracles. It was clear that this is extraordinary place. They lived with that. So the Shekinah, divine presence, God is everywhere. But where is God seen to be? Like, where is it clear that God is the temple. And that was true in the era of the first temple. Last time we said in the second temple era, it was seen a little bit less. And what about today? There's no temple. Where do you see God? That's the context of today's conversation. So I'm going to share my screen with you in a moment, as soon as I have it open on my end. And that is how we are going to jump into this. Give me a moment. Let me open this up. Okay, here we go. All right, chapter 53. I'm scrolling down because we already started it. As I mentioned, we're about halfway through. And let's do this. Oh, one thing that's very important, just for the language of this chapter. The idea that God is clearly seen in the first temple, the way he constructs that using Kabbalistic terminology is that the divine light that comes down into the world, into the temple in that era, kind of bypasses the typical screens that otherwise screen and obscure the fact that it is divine energy. Does that make sense what I just said? Yeah, I know I said it very quickly. But just to repeat myself, just in case you missed what I said, everything comes from God, right? Everything is God and it comes from God. But the reason why this world doesn't look like God, or doesn't look like there's God here, unless you look a little bit deeper, is because the light, it's tzimtzum, the light is obscured and concealed behind layers and layers and curtains and contractions, concealments, obfuscations, right? It's hidden until it looks like there's no God. Okay. But in certain contexts, the light bypasses the curtain. It's kind of like you're wearing, I have a good example. Let me stop sharing so I can kind of get into this example with you guys. Remember back in the day, a film camera? Remember that? Not a digital camera, right? Like a one with actual film, right? So you got the little canister, yes? And you opened it up, you started it off. Remember that? You had to pull it out a little bit to kind of feed it. And then you locked it in. And at least in my day, it was already, I don't know what it was like before that, but at least in the 80s when I was around, right? It was like load up a little bit and get ready to go and frame one. Boom, we're ready. Yeah. So, and you remember if you were to open the back of the camera while the film was in, the big no-no that would have done? It's like, oh my gosh, you let in the light and now you've exposed the negative or the film, and now you're going to develop your pictures and there's going to be these white splotches everywhere and you ruined everything. So that's an example of the light, the pure light comes in and you're ruined, like that closed environment. It's supposed to be a closed environment that only let in a little bit. When you press the shutter, it opens up the thing for a split second or like a fraction of a second to let in a little bit of light to expose the film exactly the way it needs to be exposed based on technology, etc. You let in too much light, you ruined it. So I'm using this example not as like God's light ruins things, but it kind of does. But hold on, let me explain what I mean. God is trying to create a closed environment here that looks ungodly, and it's working pretty well. But there's a little bit of light that comes in. But in the temple, right, that's where the camera is left open, right? There's like light pouring in over there. And if you want to know, like, if you want to hack into the system, be like, oh, wait, this is clearly not like everywhere else, which is this closed space, that would be the temple. So again, why is it like that? Because the light is bypassing the concealments. The light is coming straight in, not through the little shutter, not through the little aperture, not through the little opening. It's coming in all the way. You with me on that? Yeah. Okay. I'm just saying that so that we understand the terminology as I, once again, share my screen. Where is my screen to share? Hold on. Stick with me. Here we go. Let's see if this works. And of course, it does not, but now it does. Okay. Let's start with I'm going to paraphrase a little bit. I know I'm going back. I'm not going back to the beginning. Don't worry. Okay, here we go. So again, I'm literally paraphrasing here just so we get a running start. So I'm not reading full sentences. I'm going to go in the middle of paragraphs. Don't worry, it's all part of the plan. I'm DJing this right now. So the infinite light of the Ein Sof is in the temple. It's the Shekinah, the divine presence. It's in the Holy of Holies in the temple. And specifically, it's honed in on the 10 commandments that are in the tablets in the ark, right? Which is, I guess, very timely now, the Thursday before Shavuot, the anniversary of the giving of the 10 commandments and the tablets, etc. So this is what we're talking about, the fact that the light poured in the first temple and the 10 commandments and the tablets, etc. And it was etched, and 10 commandments, the 10 commandments were etched in the tablets as the work of the living God. In other words, that's where you saw God, and that emanated to the temple. And from there was some sort of recognition of God emanating in the world, but the epicenter was in the temple. Now, let's continue. This is where we're going to pick it up. As for this, well, actually, maybe I'll still paraphrase a little bit. As for the second temple, right, where there was no ark and there was no tablet, there were no tablets. So the Shekinah did not abide there. God's presence did not abide there. That doesn't mean that God wasn't there. It just means it wasn't as revealed as the first temple, right? It just was not on the same level. It wasn't the same category as it was in the first temple, right? In other words, the light didn't bypass all the screens in the second temple like it did in the first, but in the second temple, it did go through some checkpoints, right? The second temple, the Shekinah abided according to the order of gradual descent. It did go through some sort of hishtal shulut, some sort of lessening of the light. Malchut of Atzilut, and these are all Kabbalistic terms, of course. Malchut of Bria, Malchut of Yitzira, etc., and then the Holy of Holies of Asiya. And thus the light did become a little bit lessened, a little bit more obscured, a little bit more obfuscated. Okay. But there was still the holy presence. It was still the Shekinah was still there, and it was still more revealed than anywhere else. And he says, therefore, even in the second temple, no man was permitted to enter there except the high priest on Yom Kippur. And this is where I want to pick it up inside. So what we've established thus far is, look, the light normally comes down through divine light usually is filtered in a very heavy way, very strong filter, to the point that it's unrecognizable on the other side of the filters. In the temple, it was unfiltered. In the first temple, it was completely unfiltered. Second temple, filtered a little bit, but still you could tell there was something deeper. But now there's no temple. It's been like this for the last, 1900 plus, almost 2000 years, since the year 69 of the Common Era. So are we saying that there's no space in which God's light is unfiltered? The answer is there's still a space. There's still a space where the light comes in. Here we go. This is it. And ever since the destruction of the temple, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, has but the 4 cubits of halacha alone. Where is God found? Where is God revealed? In the 4 cubits, the 6 feet, right? It means the space of halacha, of Jewish law. That means Torah study and mitzvot. And even if one Jew sits and engaged in Torah study, he says, the Shekinah is with him. You know what that means? That means that you are in a space where God is revealed. Like you would go to the temple of old and see God and have that light cracking open the door of your camera to let the light come in unfiltered, unchecked. That's what happens nowadays each and every time that we engage in Torah study and halacha and mitzvah performance, etc. As it is stated in the first chapter of Brachot, Tractate Brachot. The phrase, the Shekinah is with him, means that although he is a being of the material world, in other words, the person is part of the filter or on the other side of a filter, nonetheless, the Shekinah is with him. That's what's going on. So, what is the portal to God? This is what he's saying. How do you get connected with God? Back in the day, you would show up to the temple and like, wow, that's God. First temple, second temple, a little bit less. But today, what do? We crack open the Torah, we study it, we do a mitzvah, halacha, etc. That's how we connect to the pure light. And the level of the Shekinah that is with him is in order of the gradual descent and investment of Malchut of Atzilut, the Malchut of Bria, and Yitzir and Asiya. So it does come down a little bit, step by step, but it's still relative to everything else of creation. It is relatively unfiltered. It's not purely unfiltered like the first temple, but relatively unfiltered relative to everything else in existence. For the 613 commandments of the Torah are by and large precepts which involve action, including even those mitzvot that are fulfilled by word and thought. In other words, even the mitzvot that are like prayer and thought, like meditation, he explains, such as Torah study, the blessing after meals, the recital of Shema, and prayer. Even those mitzvot that seemingly don't involve action. Well, I'm studying Torah. What am I doing? I'm just studying Torah. I'm saying benching. I'm blessing after a meal. What am I doing? I'm not like doing anything. I'm just saying something. I'm reciting Shema and praying. What am I doing? Still, he says that's a form of action. Why? For it has been ruled in the Talmud that meditation has not the validity of speech. In other words, if you just meditate on Torah study, if you meditate on the blessing after meal, if you meditate on the Shema, if you meditate on tefillah, on prayer, that's not considered to be fulfilling the mitzvah. You have to verbalize, you have to say it. You have to say the words of Torah, say the words of tefillah, of prayer. You have to actually speak it. And one does not fulfill one's obligation by meditation in a manner of hearer and kavanah alone, even when his manner of meditation is close to speech, as in the case when one thinks about the way in which he will utter certain words, which is called hearer, and until he gives it utterance with his lips. In other words, even it's not only if you think of a concept, but even if you think of the concept like you would as a narrative with words. Does that make sense what I'm saying or what he's saying? Sometimes you can think about something as a general concept, and sometimes you can think about it so methodically that you think of the words, one word and the next word. You think to yourself, oh, what, you don't know what I'm thinking. Shema, Yisrael, Hashem, Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And you think slowly. You didn't do it. You didn't do the mitzvah. You didn't say Shema. Shema is supposed to be said. Torah study is supposed to be said. The blessing after meal is supposed to be said. So you had wonderful thoughts, and in your mind, you even pictured the words. But here, lav kadibur dummy. Thought even that type of very methodical thought is still not speech. And you don't fulfill the mitzvah until you give it the utterance with your lips. Moreover, I don't think it's moreover. It's and, not moreover. And it has been ruled in Jewish law that the motion of the lips is considered an action. So therefore, all mitzvot form action. Let me explain what he's saying. What the Alter Rebbe is saying in Tanya is, here you have something absolutely incredible. Typically, God's light is hidden. In the temple, it's revealed. Nowadays, when you do a mitzvah. So when you do a mitzvah, one second. A mitzvah is like a physical action. And every mitzvah is a physical action. You see the tension that he's building over here. And the whole point is that the greatest light is found in doing a mitzvah, a physical action. And he says, even the mitzvot that don't look like they're physical actions are still physical actions. What do you mean? Torah study is a physical action? Yeah, you have to say it. And when you move your lips, that's action. And prayer, Shema or other prayer, it's only prayer if you say it. And when you move your lips, that's what we call action. So what we have here is this beautiful idea that that action is what defines a mitzvah. A mitzvah is defined by action. And that's precisely where God is hanging out. Mark.
Yeah, I've got a question. Early on, the Alter Rebbe emphasized or made the point that we had to control three aspects of ourselves: thought, speech, and action.
Yes.
He didn't just say action. He said thought, speech. But here he's saying, don't worry about thought and speech. It's the action that counts. So why did he change his mind?
Good. So first of all, you're right. You're right that that's what he said then. You're right that this is what he's saying now. You're right. In other words, a Beinoni is someone who is in control of their actions and their words and their thoughts. Even when a negative thought comes to mind and it's really hard to battle, the Beinoni fights the good fight and gets rid of it, thinks about something else. Speech doesn't utter a negative word, wants to, but doesn't. And action as well. So that the definition doesn't change. That is a Beinoni. What we're saying now is, after all is said and done, where should the ultimate focus be? Should it be on meditation? Should it be on speech? He says, ultimately, what makes the greatest difference in this world, what unleashes the greatest light, is what we do. And that for sure is in the control of the Beinoni. I think that's where he's going with this. Although thought, speech, and action can and must be in the Beinoni's control, right? That's our calling as a Beinoni. Not to be perfect inside, but in these three garments to be good. For sure, though, we have the ability to choose to do or not do, right? To do good and not to do the opposite of good. He says, and that in the realm of action, that's where the magic lies. So yes, he's de-emphasizing thought and speech, not to contradict what he said before, but just to really lift up what I think, in my opinion, is the most doable thing you can tell a person. And that is, I know you don't want to do it, but do it because it's amazing, right? Or I know you want to do it, just don't. Don't push the button, right? It's just, don't do it. And that's, yes, you could also not think about doing it and not talk about it. Yes, 100%. And we should be in control of that as well as per our striving Beinoni status. But action is the most accessible, hopefully the most in control, and that makes the greatest difference. So it's not just the lowest hanging fruit, so we're going to focus on that. He's saying it's the highest, well, not the highest hanging fruit, I don't know, but it's the loftiest space, or it's the holiest space to access is this realm of action and the study of Torah that pertains to action, i.e. the study of halacha of Jewish law. So that's, yeah.
Rabbi Nike said, just do it.
Just do it. Or, as the Alter Rebbe says, just Jew it. Anyway, yes. With a shofar, we have to have a new version with a shofar swoosh. Okay, this class not sponsored by Nike, but if anyone's interested in, if anyone at Nike is interested, just hit me up. I don't mind putting a Nike thing. No, I'm kidding. All right, let's jump in back to our text. All right, here we go. Okay, so again, his point is that every mitzvah is being done. Every mitzvah involves action. Even the ones that we think are kind of meditative or, whatever, it's still all about action because you have to move your lips. Next, and here we go. Listen to this. He's explaining the value and the beauty of a mitzvah. Ooh, remind me. Okay, I'm not going to say it now, but remind me to tell you the last thing the Alter Rebbe said before he passed away. Okay, remind me. And he says, the 613 mitzvot, commandments of the Torah, together with the 7 rabbinical commandments, combined to total the numerical equivalent of keter, crown, which is the supernal will. Let me explain what that is. So you have 613 biblical commandments, 7 rabbinic commandments, like Hanukkah and Shabbat candles, whatever, rabbinic commandments. So 613 plus 7 is, help me out here, 613 plus 7.
620.
Good. 620 is keter, right here in the Hebrew. Keter, chaf is 20, taf is 400, resh is 200. So 200, 400 plus 20 is 620. So keter, which means crown, right? And it's not just crown, but keter refers to the transcendent will of God on a mystical level. So the mitzvot are keter, which means God's supernal will, God's higher will. Which, so on a very simple level, the mitzvah is God's will. It's what God wants. And it's reflected in the numerology, 613 plus 7, 620, keter. Keter is will, right? So it all comes together. But here's what you need to know. The mitzvot are supernal will. Supernal will that is clothed in wisdom. Because you can understand what a mitzvah is. I mean, some of them are a little bit beyond knowledge, beyond understanding, but we can study the mitzvot. We can come to some sort of understanding of most mitzvot. So these 620 points of God's will are clothed in his wisdom. And they are united with the light of the Ein Sof in a perfect union. And now we get to the point. The mitzvot are divine will wrapped in divine intellect, united with the light of the Ein Sof, and then you and I get to do them. And when we do a mitzvah, what are we touching? We're touching on the light of the Ein Sof, the infinite light. It's the mitzvot are connected with the Ein Sof. Look at this, in a perfect union. That is a very strong term, powerful term. God, let's continue. God founded the earth with wisdom. He says, not only when you study the written law, but even when you study the oral law, like the Mishnah, the Talmud, and other works of the oral law, Kabbalah, etc., Hasidic philosophy, Tanya, right? This is also where God is found, because the verse says God founded the earth with wisdom, and that refers to the oral law as well, that is derived from supernal wisdom, as is written in the Zohar. The father, Chachma, begat the daughter, which is Malchut, the oral law. Basically, father begets daughter, father, written law, begets daughter, the oral law, the explanations and the elaborations, but it's all part of supernal wisdom. And if it's part of supernal wisdom, it's also connected with the light of the Ein Sof. And thus, when you and I study Torah, we're doing this right now. This is happening right now. You and I are like we're going into the temple of old, connecting with and standing and beholding the infinite light of God. It's happening right now. Every time we study Torah, every time we do a mitzvah, it reveals the greatest light. And now we get back to what we quoted before a few chapters ago from the Yenuka. The Yenuka was the child prodigy who kind of went in this trance and started saying all these super mystical and lofty concepts. And if you recall, I'm going to remind you what he said, the Yenuka. He was quoted actually twice before in Tanya for saying the same thing. Basically, this kid was kind of, I don't know what you would say, but espousing a mystical concept. And he said that you and I are like a lamp. Remember this analogy, the lamp? A lamp is comprised of three components: the oil, the wick, and the flame. You remember this? An oil lamp, right? Think of an oil lamp, right? Which we typically don't have in our homes nowadays because of electricity. This worked much better back in the day. Everyone understood what was going on. So you have an oil lamp. So you have obviously a container, but forget the container for now. You have in the container, there's oil, let's say olive oil. There's olive oil, Hanukkah, exactly, right? So but many people use candles, whatever. So you have the oil, and then in the oil, there's a wick. And then, then it's not light. It's not warm. It's not light until you actually attach a flame to your wick, which is going to consume the oil as fuel, and it's going to burn until the oil runs out. That's the way it works. It's kind of magic. That's the way it works. So there are three components, and all three are necessary. And we said in the analog, in other words, this on the spiritual level for you and I, what this refers to is the dynamic by which we bring light into the world, right? So the body is the wick, oil is Torah and mitzvot, and the flame is the soul. And so how does our soul, my soul, your soul, how does our soul bring light into the world? It's by being attached to the wick and consuming oil. Does that make sense? Our soul brings light into the world, into this world, by being attached to a body. And by our body consuming, burning through, I mean like expending energy on doing mitzvot. That's where we bring light into the world. And the Alter Rebbe asked a few chapters ago, but why do we need to do a mitzvah to bring light in? Isn't the fact that our soul is here good enough? And on one level it is. And that was even the topic of last night's class. It's not what we do, but it's who we are. And that's true up to a certain extent. Because at the end of the day, we also have divine obligations and expectations. And God says, I want you to do a mitzvah. If you can, obviously, right? But I want you to do a mitzvah. And when we do a mitzvah, we add the other element, which is the fuel. And as we've been discussing in the last chapter or two, and certainly tonight, the fuel, the mitzvah, is where the magic really happens. Because the soul is a byproduct of the filter, whereas the mitzvah is a bypass of the filter. I'm going to say that again. The soul, as spiritual as it is a byproduct of this cosmic filter that filters out the light to a certain extent. Whereas Torah and mitzvot, that is like the temple, that portal straight to the source where the light, the infinite light, shines through. Thus, for the soul to bring light into this world, it actually needs the medium of a mitzvah, Torah and mitzvot, to really bring the light. So you need all three components. You need the body with a soul, or a soul with a body studying Torah or doing a mitzvah. That's how the magic happens. And that's exactly what he says right here. So let's do it inside. I gave you the outline, but let's do it together in the actual text. And this is what the Yanuka, that's the child prodigy in Zohar, quote in chapter 35, meant when he said that the supernal light that is kindled on his head, namely the Shekinah, requires oil, right? So even though the soul is kindled on his head, in other words, it's holy and divine, it still requires oil. That is, to be clothed in wisdom, which is called the oil of the holy anointing. In other words, Torah. And holy signifies chachma, or wisdom, is explained in the Zohar. Kodesh, shemen, mishchat, kodesh, holy and oil are connected, just like holiness is higher than oil floats. There are many different connections between oil and holiness. That's why the Greeks wanted to defile the oil. They wanted to defile the wisdom and the holiness, etc. So there's a connection between oil and holiness and wisdom. It's all connected. All 3 points are connected. Chachma, shemen, kodesh, all three are synonymous. Holiness, wisdom, and oil. So the point is, what is the oil here? Right? You can't just have a fire. If you just light a wick on fire, it's going to burn out. You need oil. You must have oil for this lamp to be sustained. So it's not enough to have a soul that's connected with God. you also have to have the soul and a body doing a mitzvah, because the oil is the wisdom, the oil is the holiness, as explained in the Zohar. And this also refers to a reference to good deeds, namely the 613 commandments, which derive from his wisdom. So when we talk about oil is wisdom. And it's not only wisdom, which is Torah, but it's also good deeds. It's also the mitzvot. Bottom line is Torah study and good deeds, mitzvot, are the oil, are the fuel that keeps the light of the soul burning. And thereby, he says, when you have the oil, which is again is Torah and mitzvot, the light of the Shekinah can cling to the wick, i.e., the vivifying soul can cleave to the body, which is metaphorically called a wick. Right? Again, when you have oil, think about the example, think about the lamp. Don't get spiritual yet. Think about a lamp. It's only when you have oil that your flame is going to stay with the wick. Otherwise, it's going to burn up the wick. Right? You light a piece of cotton on fire, it's going to burn out. It's going to burn and go out, and then it's done. So how do you keep it burning? How do you keep it sustained flame? You have to add oil. So the only way the light of the Shekinah can cling to the wick, how does the soul connect with the body in a sustained way to bring light? The body, which is metaphorically called wick, that's only thereby when you have the oil, which is wisdom and good deeds. I hope that makes sense. Yes? Does it making sense? Okay. For just as in the case of a material candle, it's not candle, this means lamp. Candle has a connotation of like a wax candle. I'm going to modify the translation. For just as in the case of a material lamp, the light shines by virtue of the annihilation and burning of the wick, turning to fire, so does the light of the Shekinah rest on the divine soul, which is the candle, as a result of which is the lamp, as a result of the annihilation of the animal soul and its transformation from darkness of klipa to light, and from bitterness of klipa noga to sweetness of holiness in the case of the righteous, for tzaddikim. For tzaddikim are those who transform the essence of the animal soul, its intellect and emotion, from evil into goodness and holiness. All right, hold on. I don't want to spin out of control here because it's a very long sentence. If you notice, the sentence is going all the way through here. So let's break this down. He's giving the physical example and then the spiritual analog. The physical candle or lamp, the light is sustained by burning the wick with the oil, right? So too, the soul and the Shekinah on the soul is bring light into the world when it makes a transformation with the wick, when it transforms the wick by kind of burning up the wick, so to speak, not burning it up completely, but kind of burning the wick or burning through the wick. And that's what he's calling the annihilation, not literal annihilation, but figurative annihilation of the animal soul and its transformation from darkness to light. So, and maybe not full transformation for the Beinoni, full transformation for the tzaddik, or at least through the destruction of its garments, which are thought, speech, and action, as Mark said, and their transformation from the darkness of the klipot to the divine light of the Ein Sof, which is clothed in uniting the thought, speech, and action of the 630 commandments of Torah in the case of Beinanim. So essentially, depending on whether we're talking about the righteous, the tzaddikim, or the Beinanim, it's going to be a different type of burning of the animal soul in the body. So tzaddik is going to experience a complete transformation from inside out. The Beinoni is going to experience a transformation of action and speech and thought, and not full transformation. But at least there's some action. In other words, the fire, we're using a lamp analogy, the fire destroys part of the wick, right? It's not like the fire is burning the fuel directly. The fire is attached to the wick, which then sucks up the fuel and then does its thing. But there is some kilyon, there is some sort of annihilation of the wick. It burns the wick also, right? You start off with a white wick and it becomes black. It's burnt, it's singed. Something happened to the wick. So the point is that the soul doing a mitzvah is supposed to have an impact on the body, which is the wick. So for the tzaddik, it's a big effect. For the Beinoni, it's also an effect, not as big, not as radical, but also a powerful effect. But the bottom line is the soul is meant to have an effect on the body, on the wick. The flame affects the wick. If you have a lamp and you light and you strike a match and you put it to the wick and nothing happens to the wick, guaranteed you don't have a fire. Fire means a flame, a lit lamp means that the wick has been affected. The wick also is sucking up the oil. The mitzvah is working through the body, yes, but the body itself also needs to be transformed in the process. And so for Beinoni, what that means is it's by utilizing the oil that the wick keeps on being burned. Are you with me on this? The wick keeps on being affected, the more it sucks up the oil. So the more mitzvot we do, every time we do a mitzvah, the body becomes a little bit more transformed, a little bit more pure, a little bit more affected by the light of the soul. But this is this beautiful, beautiful symphony of movement that exists when we do what we're meant to be doing as per what God is telling us to do. When we're studying Torah or doing a mitzvah, what's happening is our soul and its light is now influencing the body through the medium of the mitzvah. And as long as we're fueling it with more mitzvot, the body keeps on being affected. And to different extents. Again, a tzaddik is going to have a big time effect on the body and the animal soul. And a Beinoni, also a big time effect, but in a bit of a different way.
Ari, I have a question.
Yes.
Several chapters ago, you taught us in Tanya about the two different methods or two different philosophies of, I guess, unification with the Ein Sof. One was to become basically nothing, totally consumed. The other was not. How does that relate to this?
So I don't remember exactly which piece you're referring to. Was it in one of the meditations about love and fear, or was it?
I was trying to find it. It was talking about the two different roads. It wasn't that long ago. It's maybe a few chapters.
I don't specific. I'm not picturing exactly what you're referring to.
Please, I think it was here. Okay.
Yeah, it probably was. I'm not recalling it in the moment. But I will say that this is something that's pretty solid as far as Tanya's philosophy, right? Like, what's the whole? Is there a monkey on my shoulder? Hey, Riva, how's it going? I see Mr. Monkey. Monkey wants to learn Tanya?
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. And Riva, maybe you also want to learn some Tanya. We're down to the last few minutes, the last few lines. So what he's saying here is like, it's pretty consistent with, as I said before, with the beginning of Tanya as well. Like the whole idea here is that a Beinoni really transforms the world. Like you don't have to be a tzaddik to really transform the world. You could be a Beinoni and make a real difference. A Beinoni absolutely transforms the world. And now we have this beautiful kind of physical and metaphysical construct to kind of, put all the pieces together. You have the soul, which is the flame. You have a body, which is the wick. And you have a mitzvah and Torah and mitzvah, which are the oil. And when you put them all together, you get some magic. You get a person in totality bringing light and warmth into the world, transforming the world through that light. And how is the light born? By the person studying Torah and doing a mitzvah, and thereby their own being becomes transformed and the world becomes transformed. Ari,
I found it. It's the silver love. It was the silver love and the gold love that was in chapter 50.
Yeah. I thought it might be one of the meditations on love. Look, I mean, that was, different forms of connection. I believe that it was talking about like the Kohen and the Levi, the Kohen and the Levite,
right.
different metaphors for that type of attachment, that type of love. We're talking now about not as much the love as we're talking about the practical dissolving into what it is that God wants from us to do. It's that practical, I'm channeling God's will and wisdom through me, right? It's like kind of the wick channeling the oil, like the oil is coming through the wick. The mitzvah is coming through us and affecting us, and the soul, therefore, can do its magic in that process. And that's really full circle about the power of the Beinoni. I'm right up to here. 4.
Monkey.
Here's monkey. For as a result of the transformation of the animal soul, which would be the wick in this example, originating from Klipat Noga, which is this kind of not holy but neutral shell, from the darkness of Klipot to the light of holiness and so forth, right? When the wick is transformed into an instrument for light, when the body and animal soul are transformed into instruments of divine light in this world, there is brought about the so-called ascent of the feminine waters. That's a Kabbalistic euphemism for our avoda, our divine service, which comes from below to above, which rises from below. Masculine, feminine are sometimes used as metaphors for giver, receiver. Masculine is the giver, feminine is the receiver. So masculine would be the above and feminine would be the below. In other words, God and us. And the idea here is the ascent of feminine waters means that we are, through our avodah, through our actions, we are lifting ourselves and our body and our animal soul closer, closer, closer upward toward God. And what's the point? To draw down the light of the Shekinah. So we'll go up to bring down the divine light, i.e., you do sound tired. You can go to sleep. You want to? Stay for the end of Tanya. You'll like it. I.e., revealed light of the Ein Sof, right? The ascent goes up to bring down the light of the Shekinah, the revealed light of the Ein Sof, over one's divine soul, principally dwelling in the brain of the head. In other words, when we study Torah, do a mitzvah, it's our body and animal soul channeling the oil and rising up to God, bringing the light, the infinite light back down. So what's the experience like? The experience is like going to the temple of old. It is interfacing with the essence and the monkey. Thereby, one may clearly understand the text, the verse that says, "For the Lord your God is a consuming fire." What does that mean? God is a consuming fire, as explained elsewhere, that it's only when a Jew succeeds in nullifying him or herself to God in a manner where he ceases to exist as an independent entity and is consumed in the flames of godliness. When a person basically allows the Torah and mitzvot to flow through them and doesn't get in the way, doesn't obstruct that flow, only then will he draw upon himself the light of the Shekinah, the infinite light. And this, my friends, is the conclusion of the first part of Tanya. With the help of God, may he be blessed and exalted. And this is the end of the 53rd chapter of Tanya in the first section of Tanya. So how does it end? It ends with the words as is explained elsewhere. But that is a reference to this beautiful verse, for God is a consuming fire, not in a scary way or in a negative way, not in a way of like, oh, God's a consuming fire, be careful, don't get too close. No, that's not what it means. God is a consuming fire means simply that how do we reach God? How do we really reach God in the most profound way? It's by us replicating the model of the lamp. Just like a lamp needs oil, wick, and flame, so too we need mitzvah, Torah, mitzvot, body and soul in order to bring light into the world. And that's exactly how we do it. And so, my friends, the message of Tanya, there's a lot of stuff in Tanya, but the message, you can kind of draw a line from the beginning, I think, from the beginning to the end. And that is, you and I, we're here not for ourselves, but we're here to really make a difference in the world, to bring more light into the world, to transform the world and transform ourselves along the way. And how do we do that?
I saw a monkey.
Huh?
I saw a monkey.
Yep. And how do we do that? We do that by studying Torah and doing mitzvot, back to basics. And we also do that by making sure that our thoughts don't get carried away and that our words are where they need to be. In the final analysis, it's about being a Beinoni. Being a tzaddik, you got to be born with that or blessed with that. That's already extra special. A tzaddik is already somebody who, is perfect inside and out. That's a very rare breed. Maybe a handful in every generation. But a Beinoni, everyone can be a Beinoni. It doesn't take any special pedigree. It doesn't take any special innate quality. It just takes the knowledge and the desire to be one. So I'll conclude with two stories. Number one, story that I heard from Rabbi Denberg from Florida. His uncle was Rabbi Nissen Nemenov, who was the mashpia, the spiritual counselor, the spiritual mentor in the yeshiva in France, in Paris, France, or I think Brunois, right outside of Paris. And he was Rabbi Denberg's uncle, great uncle, I don't know, some relative or maybe friend of the family, I don't know, somehow connected. Rabbi Denberg comes from Montreal, so Rabbi Nemenov used to visit Montreal and stay by his house. And when he was a kid, so he would stay sometimes the rabbi would stay in this kid's bedroom. On what I don't know the exact arrangement, but he was basically stayed in his room and then they shuffled around. One time, this the Rabbi Denberg, who's told me, I heard this story from him. So he was still a kid, but he knew enough to know about Tanya and Beinoni. And he also knew that the rumor was about Rabbi Nemenov that he was on the level of the Beinoni of Tanya. He was like on that level of like being perfect in thought, speech, and action, which is extremely not perfect inside, but perfect on the outside, which is itself an extremely lofty level. So he asked his uncle, so I hear they say about you that you're a Beinoni, but how does one become a Beinoni? So the rabbi tells the relatively young boy, he says, in the next 30 seconds, can you make sure not to think anything you shouldn't be thinking, say anything you shouldn't be saying, and not doing anything you shouldn't be doing for 30 seconds? Can you do that? Yes. 60 seconds? Yes. It's okay. Now keep on repeating that. Do it for a minute, and then the next minute, and then the next minute. And you see where I'm going with this, right? So that's one story. So what is a Beinoni? A Beinoni is somebody who is in control. And you say, well, how could I be in control? It's so hard. Can you be in control for 1 minute? Good. So you can be in control. I'm not trying to minimize it. It's the ultimate struggle, especially for the Beinoni who's not a tzaddik, who has all those other forces inside that are countering the good, the holy and the good, nonetheless. But that's the consistent message of Tanya, that it's not about how we feel inside. It's about what we do on the outside. And so the final story I wanted to share with you, the final message of the Alter Rebbe, the author of Tanya, before he passed away in 1812. He remarked to his family, I think he asked his son, when looking at the table in the room that he was in, he said, what do you see? And his son said, I see a table. And he said, I don't see a table. I see the divine light, the divine life force that is infusing this table with its vitality. And he was lifted up to this lofty level. But what was shortly before his death, but what was the last thing that he penned, the last discourse that he taught before his passing? In that heightened state of spiritual awareness, what did he teach? He composed a discourse or a letter, a short teaching that extols the virtue of practically doing a mitzvah. Because notwithstanding all the lofty visions and all the lofty revelations and seeing God on an unprecedented level shortly before he passed away, what became clear to him in that moment is that what is it all about? It's all about what we do on a practical level. And so, my friends, as we conclude this round of Tanya, there will be more, please God. As we conclude this round of Tanya, let us take to heart this message, especially right as we're at the footsteps of the holiday of Shavuot. When we got the Torah and we got the 10 Commandments, which form the core of the mitzvot, let us remember this, that our job is to transform this world. It's a tall order, but we can do it. Each one of us can bring light into the world. How do we do it? With our souls and our bodies and Torah and mitzvot. That's how we make a difference. Adina Malka, yeah.
Oh, I have a question about speech. And, you were saying that that when you pray that the commandments were about action, about speech.
Yes, verbalizing.
So does that mean like you can't read the Psalms, you have to sort of be reading them out loud?
Ideally verbalize. Yeah.
And it just seems like, like I listen to a lot of the meditations from Rabbi Leba Wolf.
Yes.
And that's silent. That's just listening and going within. So
we also need that. It's not a country. We also need that. We also need the focused thought and the silence and the meditation 100%. But we also need the action to make vibrations in the world, right? To stir the environment around us with this holiness. Again, it's not to discount the other stuff, the more meditative part of it, but it's to kind of to enhance or to, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't know, but to lift up the actions that we do and the words that we say as well. So ideally, verbalize as much as you can.
But like we're listening to like some of the recordings, like from your class, and then we listen again. So you're just listening to a class and that doesn't count?
It does count. For sure it counts. But ideally, if you could say some words of Torah, I don't know if I have some practical advice for that, like what actually to say. But again, ideally, we verbalize Torah study. That's the ideal.
And seems like some of the good deeds are from not speaking, from not saying.
Right.
Gossip.
You're right. There's a lot of do nots, right? And the do nots are a valid part of Torah. So what kind of action is it? You're right. It's the absence of negative action. So it's kind of like, putting good energy into the world and making sure that we're not putting negative energy or dark energy into the world. It's kind of putting the light in the world. And the other mitzvot, like the do, and there's more do nots than do's. There's 248 do's and 365 don't do. So the majority of mitzvot, the majority of the 613 are things that we're not supposed to do. So yeah, you're right. It wouldn't be, it's not the doing in that case. It's the just making sure that we're not pumping in negative
speech, yeah,
or negative energy into the world. But consistently, the idea here is that you and I have the power to change the world, even though we're not perfect. It's us imperfect human beings that can change the world and will change the world for the better. That will bring Mashiach. It's us. It's not the perfect ones. That's not what God wanted. God wanted the imperfect ones to make a difference. Why are there any tzaddikim then? To show us where we're going, right? It's a role model to show us. It's like me in golfing. I'm not going to get into the hole, but you're showing me which direction I'm headed, right? So it's like, that's where we're headed. Are we going to get there in action? Maybe not in all the way, but that's where we're going. But that's why there's so many more non-tzaddikim than tzaddikim, because This vision is not built by perfection. It's built by imperfection, striving to do what it needs to do. That creates that tension of the imperfect acting perfect, that inner tension and that push, despite, it's like the burning of the wick. It's like, yeah, you kind of just have to like think about it and meditate on it. It's like the burning of the wick. There's like a tension there. There's like it's burning, it's being consumed, and there's oil coming through it, and it produces. It's kind of a messy thing. Produces beautiful light. Produces beautiful light. So my friends, I thank you for being on this journey with me. Stay tuned because we are going to continue Thursday night study. So whether we're going to go back to the beginning of Tanya, or maybe we'll move to a different section of Tanya, there's multiple parts of Tanya, or maybe we'll move to another text, possibly, maybe this one that I'm holding in my hand, Shar HaBitachon, Gate of Trust. So stay tuned for more information. Email forthcoming sometime next week, please God. We got the holidays Sunday night, Monday, and Tuesday. So stay tuned for that. Oh, I should mention, speaking of the holidays, speaking of Shavuot, that we are going to be doing a nighttime Torah study Sunday night, starting at 10:30 p.m. So 10:30 at night on Sunday, we'll be doing some late night Torah study with cheesecake and coffee and tea and whatnot, whatever you like. Tea for me at least, and I also want who likes that. And you can stay as long as you want and enjoy the company and the study and the cheesecake and all that. Otherwise, I want to wish everybody Shabbat Shalom and a Chag Shavuot Sameach. Although I don't think I've ever heard anyone say that, but Chag Sameach for Shavuot. And as the traditional Hasidic greeting goes, you and I should have, may you have a Kabbalah Torah b'simcha u'b'pnimiyut. May you receive Torah once again this year with joy and with sincerity. For the 133rd anniversary of the giving of the Torah, may it be a year of threes. 3 is a good number. And so may it be a year of where Torah really is integrated with us and we're integrated with it. And through it, we bring the light into the world and make this world a home for God and end all of the pain and all the suffering and bring Mashiach with goodness and blessing for all. Thank you. And God bless.
Thank you. Yashkoach.
Pleasure.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Sameach.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
Thank you very
Mark
much.
and
Appreciate it.
David and Stan and Adina Malka and Fran and Dror. Great to see you guys. And Steve and Sandrine.
Yasher Koach. Everybody was on that class for 12 years.
Say it again. What? Say it again.
Yasher Koach to anybody who was on that class for 12 years.
I know, right? Yeah. Yeah. We have a few. Adina Malka. Wait, Adina Malka, were you behind the? I got something in the mail for Israel. Adina Malka, did you coordinate that?
Yeah.
Thank you very much. That was really beautiful. Thank you. Trees planted, 4 trees, right? 4 trees in Israel planted in honor. I have it in my office. I have in honor of the of this class, right? In honor of the time. Am I getting it right?
Yeah, from the your Tanya class of
Yes.
2021.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coordinating. Thank you all for those that participated for participating. It's very meaningful, especially given everything that's going on. We need to really be strong and supportive. Joy and Lisa, it's great to see you all. Have a wonderful evening. Laila Tov, Shabbat Shalom, Chag Sameach, and other Hebrew words of blessing. Yes, Mark.
I said this in the chat, but in case you didn't see, it's been an incredible journey.
I concur, and I will say that some of the warmest memories that I have are both now and back in the day, but also in hearing the participants in this class, repeat words of Tanya. And I'll say that I've heard, Mark and Adina Malka, I've heard you guys talk about Tanya, and I know sometimes back in the day at the Kiddush, Chabad in town, the old building, learned in Tanya. It's really beautiful to be on this journey together, and all of you for being on this journey together in Tanya, whether long or medium or the last year, which is also a big commitment and also a long time. It's been fantastic. So thank you for the thank you. And I couldn't say any better myself. It's been an incredible journey. All right. We'll see you guys soon. Take care, everybody. Stay healthy, stay safe. Bye. Have a good
Thank you.
pleasure.